We discuss requests from South Korea, finding allies against North Korea, potential legal action against Kim Jong-un, enemy tactics, playing the mole, and the New York Times coverage of Donbass. We're currently addressing these challenges. Oleksandr Musienko, head of the Center for Military Legal Studies. Alexander, congratulations. Zelenskyy, in an interview with South Korean KBS, stated that Ukraine may seek an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court for North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un if the North Korean army uses military force against Ukrainian citizens. At the same time, we are already addressing South Korea with a set of weapons that we may need, preparing a request for weapons for Seoul. At least a representative of South Korea will come, and we will talk. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation, reports that 300 North Korean troops are already in the Kursk region. Ukraine's UN representative, Sergey, states that their numbers may increase to 4 to 5. Nebenzia claims these reports are fabrications to distract from the presence of NATO troops, which have supposedly been found destroyed by Naryshkin and Nebenzia. What should South Korea do in response to North Korea's actions, and what allies can it find to counter this threat, as Zelenskyy suggests? This is a challenge to global security, not just Ukraine's. Globally, we see that the situation in South Korea is stable. They held large-scale exercises with the United States, where Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, was present. They held large-scale exercises with the powerful use of aviation from both countries, and from this point of view, they are doing well. Lloyd Austin and the United States have assured us that they will defend South Korea by all means necessary, even with the use of nuclear weapons. I think that such assurances are very important. In many ways, the attention is directed there, and the United States may even be directed even more, because the China factor and the North Korea factor are relevant. We understand this, but at the same time, I believe that as of today, as far as South Korea is concerned, the issue is globally closed. They will not have any problems. That is, at least for the moment, the issue of supporting Ukraine and supporting Ukraine should be that we get enough help. In an interview with the Northern European media, the president of Ukraine said that, listen, we see an insufficient response from our Western partners to support Ukraine amid the challenges we are facing today. We need long-range weapons to prevent the enemy from advancing, especially regarding North Korea and the emerging axis of evil. The president emphasized that we are not calling for troop deployment to avoid escalating the conflict. We are being careful to avoid raising this issue with our partners. We recognize figures like Donald Trump and Slovakia's Prime Minister Fico, who have suggested involving Europe in a war and deploying nuclear weapons in Ukraine. We don't need to give them a reason. Now about the synergy of efforts. It should come from the United States, which made the first step. I understand that they have a commitment to South Korea that has existed for years, and in fact they guaranteed security after the war on the Korean Peninsula, which gave South Korea a chance. Now they are in Seoul, there is a military base, and I have no doubt that if it is attacked, the United States will respond.
По відношенню до Південної Кореї є зобов'язання, які існують роками і, власне кажучи, фактично вони і гарантували безпеку після війни на Корейському півострові, що
including Kim Jong-un's orders.
Корея отримала шанс. Ну і зараз вони там є, вони є в Сеулі, є військова база, і в мене немає сумнівів, що якщо кимось ця військова база буде атакована, Сполучені Штати...
We say that South Korea is secure, but we do not yet have such security guarantees. We are supported by our partners, and when North Korea's presence shifts to Europe, threats arise not only for the Indo-Pacific region, but also here, and we need to respond adequately. This means supporting Ukraine as well as South Korea.
То, відповідно, загрози не тільки для Індо-Тихоокеанського регіону. Загрози вони вже і тут. І на них треба адекватно відреагувати. А адекватно це підтримати Україну.
The next point is that we must clearly understand that South Korea is now absolutely protected.
Ми ж повинні чітко розуміти, що зараз Південна Корея абсолютно захищена.
They have an army, they have their own forces, they have U.S. guarantees. But let's assume that 10,000 North Koreans will come to Russia to study, then another 20,000. 10,000 will take part in combat operations. Perhaps not everyone will die or surrender. Some will return, officers, combat teams, etc., having gained experience in 21st century warfare, which is very important, using drones, ray guns, and so on. We have to realize that this could be a completely different quality force that could challenge South Korea even then.
Це ж, в принципі, може бути значно інша за якістю сила, яка вже тоді може кинути виклики Південній Кореї. Тому все дуже пов'язано. І тому, коли ми
Therefore, everything is very much connected. And when we turn to South Korea, it is good that a decision has been made to exchange delegations. We discussed this with you as well, and this is the right decision, because when we talk about communication and interaction, it needs to be strengthened in this way, by exchanging representatives and delegations. This is important. I believe we have a chance to strengthen our cooperation with South Korea, especially regarding weapon supplies. I do not exclude that official Seoul statements are related to the fact that South Korea needs, let's say, approval and a decision from the United States to transfer certain types of weapons to Ukraine. In fact, these statements refer to the fact that South Korea may not mind using the United States as an intermediary country through which weapons and ammunition can be delivered to Ukraine directly through the United States.
Через Сполучені Штати може постачатися зброя і боєприпаси до України.
This way, I see, may be faster than waiting for South Korea to change its legislation.
Будемо чекати, що Південна Корея змінить законодавство, яке не дає їм на сьогоднішній день можливостей постачати зброю напряму,
which does not allow them today to supply weapons directly to the states involved in the conflict. Let's hope so, because for now, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said in an interview with the South Korean TV channel KBS, Putin will be able to increase the contingent, testing the reaction of the West. And what is the reaction? It's nothing. It's zero. Well, at least we can move towards one. Why are Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov and self-proclaimed Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko simultaneously talking about a draw in the war, a ceasefire, and the Istanbul agreements? Well, of course, it's clear why. Because this is Putin's eternal mantra, and Lavrov supports it, that we should go to the Istanbul agreements. That is, in fact, nothing new here. He constantly emphasizes this. Lavrov confirms it. They can frame it as a victory, despite a draw, depending on how they interpret and present the information to make the audience perceive it positively. This often leads to retransmission. Notably, in Russia, when Putin makes a statement, ministers and propagandists often practice the best ways to interpret his words.
От я маю на увазі, в якому сенсі? Ну, в тому сенсі, Путін же сказав в інтерв'ю російським медіа про те, що, все должно закончиться только на російських условиях.
I also do not exclude that these relays about Russia's victory often end up with the fact that there may be some kind of dialogue or Istanbul format.
Інтерпретації, подачі інформації, яким чином її так подати, щоб аудиторія її сприйняла з правильними сигналами, оцінила це саме як перемога. Відповідно з переможними реляціями і усіма наслідками. Саме для цього, я думаю, це фактично і ретранслюється. І тут дуже цікавий момент, що
Actually, that's what I'm getting at.
Росії, що Путін щось каже, а потім хтось із міністрів чи ще когось, чи навіть пропагандистів починають вправлятися в тому, як найкраще розтлумачити ці слова.
It often happened to them that from the beginning of the full-scale aggression, Putin talked about demilitarization and denazification, and then they agreed to the Istanbul format. Let's look at the case of Azovstal and the Azov heroes who fought.
От, власне кажучи, до чого це я все веду. У них так часто бувало. Тобто, від початку повномасштабної агресії Путін же ж говорив демілітаризація, денацифікація, потім же ж погодились на стамбульський формат. А у них багато...
They were shouting that there would be a tribunal, a death sentence for everyone. No one would be released, no one would be exchanged. And then the exchanges began, and I think they will continue until Ukraine gets everyone out. They first outline this position and then allow exchanges.
Ми не випустимо, не обміняємо, а потім почались обміни. І будуть продовжуватися, я думаю, доки Україна не витягне всіх зараз з цих катівень російських.
It's the same here. First, Putin says that Ukraine will be destroyed, deprived of its statehood, denazified and demilitarized, and then someone in his entourage starts talking about a truce.
Що Україну позбавлять державності, денацифіцирують, демілітаризують і так далі, і багато чого іншого. А потім починає хтось з оточення Путіна вести діалоги про якесь перемир'я. Тому що мені здається, що як би вони не чекали Трампа, але вони не
Because no matter how much they are waiting for Trump, they are not sure that even he will say that everything should be on Russian terms. And here's the question. That's why they are constantly probing, looking for points of contact, imposing their vision through pressure on the front, Shahid attacks, and so on.
Росія ж теж хоче нав'язати багато що нам, скажімо так, ми розуміємо, своїм тиском на фронті, ударами цими шахедами.
What is it for? What are the goals? One of them is to seize Dnipro, Zaporizhzhia, and other territories. We understand that this is one thing, but the realities are different. Sometimes Putin needs to talk about the realities on the ground, that Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Dnipro, etc. remain Ukraine's. That's why they are probing the parameters of possible negotiations, but from positions that do not suit us at the moment. I don't know why, but they are probing the parameters of possible negotiations. I think that yes, it's just that the positions they want to take are absolutely not acceptable to us at the moment. Even with these DPRK troops, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says that Putin is acting like a sapper in a minefield, probing the West's reaction and feedback to these negotiating tricks and more. We have already mentioned Zaporizhzhia. The spokesman for the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin, said that Russians are planning an offensive with armored vehicles in the area of Pryutny and Lavadny in Zaporizhzhia region. A day earlier, he said that we were conducting a stabilization operation there, but the Russians had concentrated 200,000 troops in the south and were intensifying their offensive near Lavadny. How threatening is the situation, their contingent and plans, and our readiness to stop them? First, I must say that the enemy has indeed been concentrating certain forces there for some time. There are two reasons and explanations for this. First, these forces are deployed at training grounds, headquarters, etc., where the enemy keeps them, conducting training. These forces are then redeployed, mostly to the east or left in the Zaporizhzhia sector for future attacks. This is the first point. The second point is that they are certainly preparing for activation in the Zaporizhzhia sector and therefore ready for assault offensives.
На цьому так само. І тут, звичайно, що є виклики і загрози, тому що ми бачимо, що там були певні успіхи у ворога
There are challenges and threats, especially with some enemy successes in the Vremyivka direction, and their focus on the Donetsk sector, where they've achieved minor tactical victories. However, I believe Zaporizhzhia is not a current priority for them. I had similar thoughts last summer when I suggested that Putin would try to demonstrate force in regions like Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, especially before the Ukrainian peace summit. It was then that Putin was saying that Ukraine should withdraw from Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, and so on. But I can say that they tried to form certain forces, but they were prevented by the Kursk operation and other factors. Then they tried to advance again, but these attacks were repelled. So I think all their actions can be more of a distraction right now. Russia wants us to concentrate certain defense forces here, to move our reserves here, and not to do so, for example, in the Pokrovsk direction. You understand, right? This is the reason. That is, it seems to me that the enemy is not in a situation where it can attack everywhere at the same time. They are likely to focus on the Kurakovo-Pokrovsk direction. Therefore, this will be decisive, and the Zaporizhzhia direction, in my opinion, can play a distracting role. Pokrovsk, a little more than 6 kilometers from the city, is already panicking, and my friends and acquaintances of friends are panicking because it is only 20 kilometers from the Dnipro region, and it will actually remain. The New York Times reports that the stalemate at the front in 2023 set the stage for Russia's recent successes. Military expert Pasi Peroinin from Blackbird Group notes that Russia is using tactics similar to the game Mole, where new crisis points in defense arise faster than they can be addressed, allowing Russia to exploit weaknesses quickly. Mole is a popular arcade game where players hit a mole's head as it pops up from various holes. Figuratively, it describes a situation where attempts to solve problems are superficial, resulting in only temporary improvements. What tactics are the Russians using, and how threatening is the situation for Pokrovsk? Should my friends and their acquaintances in the Dnipropetrovsk region be concerned? There are other comparisons that can be made. Of course, there are various examples. They may indicate that the enemy is trying to probe our defense. This is not a new tactic. We know it and observe it. They are trying to break through areas that the enemy thinks may be somewhat weaker. This is where the enemy can achieve some success. This is a clear tactic that the enemy is using and will probably continue to use. The second thing is to create crisis moments for us, to force us to maneuver our forces to be a little faster than we can now. The enemy is trying to outsmart us in this, taking advantage of the fact that we cannot always act quickly and maneuver units along the long front line, looking for problem areas.
Користуючись тим, що, можливо, ми не можемо зараз дуже швидко діяти, маневрувати нашими підрозділами вздовж такої довгої лінії фронту.
But Ukraine is also acting on the defensive. No one is simply watching and telling Russia, go ahead and attack, here are our weaknesses. They are also being created trouble spots, dragged into battles in which they may not have planned to participate for a long time. For example, the battle for Selidov.
Можливо, вони навіть і не розраховували затримуватися і брати досить тривалу участь. Я маю на увазі, наприклад, битва за Селидове. Тому що, якщо подивитися, Росія...
Russia was heading for Novohrodivka, actually heading for Pokrovsk, but they were stopped there, their logistics were interrupted, and the enemy was forced to go to the southern flank, to Selidov, where they were significantly delayed. So we see that if the forecasts predicted that in September there would be street fighting in Pokrovsk, I read such forecasts by analysts, including Western ones. What about that in September there would be direct street battles for Pokrovsk, and then the enemy would move on to Pavlograd? This is what was relayed and spread. Now it is clear that they have stalled, and Ukrainian troops are doing everything possible, and perhaps even impossible, sorry for the tautology, to prevent further advancement of the enemy and to prevent them from developing a rapid pace of operations. So this is what is happening now. The coming weeks and months, I would even say, are the period of the battle for Kurakhove and Pokrovsk. Will Russia be able to semi-encircle or completely surround Pokrovsk by the end of the year? I doubt it, given their pace. Regarding the Dnipropetrovsk region, I will say this. The question of all regions where active hostilities are taking place has one answer. Do not ask if the enemy will come, but prepare to meet him, as Sun Tzu taught. In the case of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, this means fortifications, well-fortified positions, and a clear plan for the oblast's defense. We are preparing for the possibility of enemy hostilities, but it's uncertain what will happen in the coming weeks or months. Kurakhove and Pokrovsk are still ahead, and they may remain stuck for a long time. It's unclear under what conditions they could leave, whether they will advance, or if they have any plans. We will, of course, keep a close watch on the situation. The occupiers are panicking, the railroad connection is collapsing, and logistics is collapsing. You mentioned several reasons for its importance to the occupiers, but their situation isn't very favorable. Why did the occupiers like it there, but not so much anymore? How important is it? And why did we take on Berdyansk so much? This narrow strip along the Azov Sea has long been favored by the occupiers for housing their headquarters, as it offers nearby entertainment infrastructure, especially in summer. The location is convenient, being by the sea and away from the front line. So the logic here is absolutely clear. And secondly, of course, all this was used for logistics. There are roads and railroads, and they all run along the coast, so Russia also used this. Thirdly, in addition to headquarters, they could also deploy certain units that were there before they were ready to move to the areas of active hostilities. So this is also a reason. That's why, in fact, there is, firstly, the command of certain groups of troops, secondly, the logistics used to transfer military supplies, and thirdly, personnel who could concentrate, and different ones. And that's why, in fact, the strikes are being carried out. Plus, I would note that this work will become, let's say, more systematic, as it seems to me, strikes against the so-called operational rear of the enemy. But 30, 40, 50, 70 kilometers through the occupied territories in order to weaken them is something that simply must be done. I think that this work will continue, and I am not sure that it will be practicing the enemy's logistics behind the lines, because it is not his place, it is not his land, it has never been, and will never be. Thank you very much for this conversation and analysis, and I am sincerely grateful that you found the time. I'll see you on Monday, and I look forward to seeing you, as do our viewers. Goodbye, thank you, have a good day. Oleksandr Musienko, head of the Iskopic Research Center. If you don't want to miss Oleksandr, then subscribe, as I did a long time ago, to Oleksandr Musienko's YouTube channel, and you will have fresh analytics in the morning and evening.
Центру військових досліджень. Якщо не хочете сумувати за Олександром, то підписуйтесь, як і я це зробила дуже давно на YouTube Олександра Musienko channel.
And of course, please come to us, because we also have other topics and a detailed vision from Oleksandr. So please subscribe to Zahidnet and 24th's YouTube channels and watch us wherever it is convenient for you. Take care of yourself, friends. Believe in the armed forces of Ukraine. See you soon, and we will win.